So we can look at the difference between rote practice, which is repetitive along prescribed lines, and more improvised practice. So a typical training session will generally include block practice. So we're going to do such and such repetitions so many times. So we might do a punch 1, 2, to a kind of set tempo, a set beat. And equally we have a more free-flowing session which implements all these things in an improvised fashion, in a free-flowing way. So the difference between the two is that one of them creates a rhythm within the internal system. So it creates a kind of stability and a kind of predictability that everything's going to clockwork, to the time, to the clock. Whereas the other one, improvised play or training, involves breaking that and happening in a chaotic fashion or in a much more unpredictable way. So, depending on the goal, you might want to establish a particular way, a particular routine and predictable functioning. So for instance, if you were to walk, you'd want to establish a rhythm within the body so that you could then basically run on autopilot and maybe think about something else, so that your body is creating a rhythm of activity, kind of like wheels rolling around in the car, so that you can then go somewhere. So for instance, if you want to do meditative training, it could be a moving form of meditation, which is to a particular tempo and rhythm. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, in a predictable time scale. You could then free the mind up to do something else. So that means it doesn't mean that you're switched off, but it means the mind can actually do something else. So say you're walking, you could also think over many different things. It's the same with martial arts. If you're doing the predictable 1 kick, 2 kicks, 3 kicks, 4 kicks, rest, go again. It allows you to do something else, whether that's plan the day, whether that's feel what's happening inside here, inside the system. Whereas the improvised training involves a lot more involvement with the perceptions, the attentiveness, so that you're fully engaged with what you're doing there, and you're fully involved in looking for that moment. So it's a lot more intense in terms of perception and involvement of the senses, whereas the rote, predictable training frees up those senses to do something else. So it's not a question of better or worse. In music, for instance, if you establish a beat, a predictable drum beat, predictable bass line, you can then lay over the top a solo of some sort, whether that's on a trumpet or a guitar. So you wouldn't say one's better than the other. One's more effective for freestyle, doing as you like, soloing, and the other one is to establish a particular tempo. Now, if you're going to train with other people, you often need a format. The orchestra needs to all play in time. When you're by yourself, you don't need that, because you can hold an internal rhythm yourself and then jump out of it. You can go bam, 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 and then jump out of it. However, when you're training with others, this is another consideration. You will need that predictable format, which might be a bit more uninteresting in terms of full engagement, but at the same time it's necessary because you're part of a group, you're part of an orchestra. You're not just a one-man band. So we can look at it in terms of whether you're training as a one-man band internalizing all the rhythms and then jumping out. There's still an understanding of pacing, of rhythms, but it's more broken down, it's more improvised, it's more mixed. Whereas the other kind of training, the rote training, the predictable timings, that's more fixed, and it's flatter, but it's also got a quality to it that allows you to do it with repetition without using all the energy. So that we can look at it that way in terms of energy use. If we're using all the perceptions in that moment to improvise something and go full intensity there and hold the rhythm at the same time, break it, this requires an intensity of the system that perhaps beginners won't be familiar with. So it's often best to start, in a more predictable 1, 2, 3, 4, just flatly going through things without any particular flair or dynamism. And then we can move on to improvised exercises or drills or whatever you want to call them, improvised performance. But we never leave the predictable, the time frame. We never leave the set time frame just because we're improvising. If you have a solo on the guitar, you will still do it in time with the band. And it's the same within the system. There's still a rhythm going on internally between the fighter and between you. But you are just able to slip things in between each phase, each bar, if you like, if we're to use music analogy. So it takes a great understanding of the rhythms and the timings and the bars and the time frames to be able to jump out coherently and improvise on top of that.